Hey everyone, and welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast, where we talk to geniuses throughout the commercial real estate and building automation industries, asking them how they've gotten where they are, who's walked alongside them, and how they're helping others along the way. This is episode 7 of season 2, and I'm your host, Tim Vogel. In today's episode, I'm very excited to be speaking with Clare Meredith of Google. Hey Clare, welcome to the Building Geniuses podcast.
Hi Tim, thanks for having me.
I'm very glad that you're here. So you and I met, it was last year. We were on a panel together talking about sensors and IoT inside of buildings and what's a good strategy and what's a bad strategy. And there was one thing that you talked about that kind of blew my mind. And I don't know how many times I've brought it up since, but it was this idea of, so many people have this have a sales pitch that says, let's go and deploy these wireless sensors, but there's no decommissioning plan. So you have a commissioning plan, but no decommissioning plan. And I was like, man, that's really great. And so I don't know how many times I've weaved that in now to the narrative as we talk about smart buildings. And so many times on the controls side, which is primarily what we spend so much time talking about, we're talking 20, 30 years. But from a wireless sensor side, those are much more consumable. And so what's your plan there? And that's just a great way to vet out vendors. So all that to say, thank you very much for that.
You're so welcome.
It was very formative, obviously. But again, thank you for being here. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you're spending a lot of your time now doing, and then we'll go back and figure out how you got there.
Yeah, well, interestingly, that I love that stuck with you, because that was for sure learning for me and for most of the kind of stakeholders I work with. That side of my job is actually a relatively small side. Where I spend the majority of my time is in all things testing. So like that, an internal customer will come to us and say, hey Claire, we have this project, or the business needs something for some purpose and technology is going to solve it. And I take them through an assessment process that we call device qualification. And it looks at the network and security capabilities of an IP connected device. So that could range from your standard building automation systems to, I keep using this as an example. I think the coolest thing that's come across us was a robot arm that made salads, which I think is a very unique.
Yeah,
I'm still not completely sure what the problem was. that thing was
I think we all need one. I didn't realize I needed one until just now.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And yeah, so we work on what's called it's called BOSS. It's the Digital Buildings Program at Google. And it's targeting the Google real estate and trying to deploy IoT and deploy security and deploy networks at scale for building automation systems and robot arms.
Yeah, absolutely. Salad making robots.
This is it. When I take those kind of things to security, they're like, what?
Yes.
This is not excited. So yeah, it can be quite fun with some of the more unexpected use cases that come along. So yeah, I'll work pretty closely with manufacturers to kind of take them through that process. It can be a little arduous depending on where each company is in their IoT and security journey. People, the first question people ask is, oh, well, how long will this take? Because in their mind, they're like, listen, Claire, we just need to get this thing tested and approved. And it's how long is a piece of string? There's so much that goes into this assessment, and you're starting from scratch with every single system, trying to understand how it works. What are the implications for security? What's the implications for access, for operations? And I think we all know those things can clash a lot. So that's the kind of the bulk of what I do. And then in addition to this, I work with security a lot to try and take the security assessment side of that and scale it. So we get a little bit more efficient with that assessment. We try and standardize on requirements, see what's going on in the industry, what are other people doing, what are internal teams doing, because obviously Google's a very large company. And sometimes it's like dealing with lots of different companies in and of itself. So you need to kind of go out to the company and find out what people are doing on the consumer IoT side, or even with external industries. So that's a big part. A problem space that we still maybe could keep working on.
And then where is kind of your territory? What, where's the area that you focus on most for Google? I mean, first, where are you based?
I don't know if the accent gave it away, but I'm in Ireland, in Dublin.
Yeah.
Dublin is the EMEA Google headquarters. So we've about, fairly large campus here. But funny enough, the majority, I think I might be the only resource based in Dublin. Everyone else is in the UK or the US. So I do a lot of international work, but my work focuses globally. So, whatever we do, we try to do it once for global impact, as opposed to, anything smaller than that. And then in terms of the technology we look at, I'd say the vast majority BAS systems, your BMS, your lighting, energy metering. But more and more, we've got a great field services partner who are really pro technology to solve their business problems. So they bring us a lot of fun stuff as well.
Yeah. Is that the robot arm salad people?
That was the robot.
Yeah.
That was the same people, yeah.
So, taking that international look at things, systems are different all over the place. Different vendors, different protocols, different security measures. I imagine that probably adds some interesting nuance, especially when you talk about focusing on how do we do this at scale. Can you walk us through a little bit what that looks like regionally? I mean, do you try to take a kind of a broad brush approach as much as possible, or do you have to focus kind of in different territories or regions?
If I may, can I start with a little bit of what the BOSS program is trying to achieve? Because that will kind of give you better context as to how we approach this. So Google's digital building program recognized that systems traditionally have been installed in silos. So, you've a single or a number of devices on a third-party network, which is sending data to some location, and there's some user interface. Every system is going to be similar, but with those kind of broad elements to it. What Google wanted to do was remove those silos and flip the whole thing kind of horizontally. So there are only device types now. It's on a single network with data going to a single place, which then allows your end user access to a vast range of data to solve their own business problem in whatever way works, with applications or dashboards, build versus buy, all those things. So the program's not trying to solve everybody's business problems, but give them the capacity to kind of decide what way works best for them. So with that kind of new horizontal structure, we have a bunch of system types in scope, which I just kind of talked a little bit about. We do apply a broad brush kind of approach. So, but the way we do that with my specific work is with networking standards. We have a network and we know how that works. So we know what we need from our devices. There are security policies, so we know what security measures we want. So we look for that from our products. And we've a pretty strict test plan. We've a bunch of things that, you must have. And then we have things, look, we know we won't have them now, but we'd love them in the future. And then we have things, if you have them, great. If you don't, we won't worry about it. So that applies to any device type, which that can cause a lot of complexity as well, because exactly like you said, every system is different, which is part of, I think, our team are experts in none of, well, they are actually experts in BMS, but in all the others, they're not experts. But what they are experts in is figuring this stuff out. So they're really good at deconstructing these systems and trying to figure out what are the blockers, what are the things that are going to, cause problems later down the line. So it is a broad brush approach, but it is applied specifically. We start at the beginning. Every new device that comes in, we start from scratch, and we try and apply those rules to it.
That's one of the fun things about this industry, particularly as you start getting into smart buildings and you get out of, your siloed products, is particularly as a manufacturer. If all I worked on was the stuff that we sell and integrating it, I'd get really good at that, right? And I'd be an expert at that. But with like our cloud-based platform, we can connect to anything. It forces you to kind of get familiar with all these other systems that are out there, which seems inexhaustible. Like you could just forever spend your career doing that. And so, just like you said, you may be an expert at some things, but you really ultimately then become an expert at figuring things out.
But honestly, it sounds so flippant, but I didn't know it was a skill until I went, oh, there's quite a skill to this. And, then I often, one of the other things I do in my day-to-day is a little bit of consulting on, pilot projects from the likes of the food team or sustainability. And they often want a very general conversation ahead of sharing any detail. And what I've noticed is I've actually gotten quite good at guessing what the architectures might be for particular system types and where the blockers might be. So I can say to them, well, choose something in this territory or look out for this language. And, it actually, it's been an interesting evolution of my own knowledge, which I wasn't expecting.
Well, and because there's best practices, there's pitfalls that people, easily fall into, those siloed systems that don't communicate to anything else, for instance. And then you have the security side of that as well. Well, hey, it's a great product, but they have not at all done anything security-wise. Big red flag.
Yes.
And then the cream the cream rises to the top. The best solutions, the best architectures have a similar vein throughout them, which then ultimately leads to the best interoperability for your smart building solutions. That was a bit of a salesy.
It was a good one, though.
Yeah. So Claire, how did you get into the industry? Let's go back. How did you get into buildings? Was that right out of school? Was that an internship? Let's go as far back as you want.
Oh wow. So no, this was not, when I was in school, this was not what I wanted to do. I think the two things I can remember was an interior designer and a photographer. They're the two things I remember. No, I was more the artsy type. Had no ambitions to be in this field. This kicked off, I think, I left retail and went into just temping for about 2 years. Didn't know what I wanted to do, so I said I'll just knock around for a while and go work wherever they'll have me. And I got into facilities through the temping. Just this is going to be a tangent, Tim, so bear with me.
No, I love it. I love it.
Decided I was big into the gym at the time in my mid-20s, and I had a trainer who said, you could be a great personal trainer. And I went, okay, which is a general theme throughout my career. I tend to just have people make suggestions and I just say yes, and I end up somewhere. So I went back to college, started doing that. Then all my friends said, all the money for personal training is in Australia, you should move there. And I said, okay. So I moved to Australia. When I came back, I applied for a job with Aramark, who at the time had the facilities management contract for Google in Dublin. I walked into the interview thinking, wasn't bothered. My primary goal when I came back from Australia was to go back to college full time and do a degree. So I went into the interview, not that bothered about the job. And I came out thinking, oh my God, I need that job. So thankfully I got it.
Yeah. What about the job impressed you so much?
Well, the thing that made me go for the interview was they told me it was a gym on site. So I was pretty easily swayed. When I came out of the interview, what made me want the job was the problems they presented to me in the meeting and the ways in which you could creatively solve them. I remember one of the first projects I got handed. The Dublin campus is on a canal, and one of the offices backs out onto that canal, and there was a team on the ground floor of this office who wanted pedalos on the canal so that they could take their laptops out and have meetings on the canal. So, when you're presented with those kinds of problems, you're going to want to figure it out.
Yeah, it's like I could do that. It's not hard.
Yeah. So yeah, that was ultimately what kind of had me walking and going, I really need this job. So that was how I got onto the Google account, firstly. And a couple of years in, I had been on the campus was growing, and there was new offices coming online kind of a couple of times a year. And I would be on a lot of those project calls, and I'd manage what was called FTOB, the first day of business. So there was kind of 2 or 3 months of prep from the facility standpoint before a building would open. And then there was kind of like the hypercare after it opened. Through that work, I built a relationship with the network infrastructure team. So the group that deployed the hardware for the network. They said to me one day, hey, Claire, we have a project coordinator role. Would you be interested? And I said, I have no knowledge of network infrastructure, and I'm not a project coordinator. And they said, well, do you know what? You'll figure it out. And I did.
Yeah, and you said, okay. Yeah.
I said, okay. So through that, then I met Kathy Farrington, who leads Google's digital building program. And we started to work together. She said to me one day, I was helping a colleague figure out a process for what we're calling device qualification. And I was in London one day and I was leaving for the airport. And as I was leaving, I said, look, if I'm going to write this process, would it make sense just for me to own the work? And she went, yeah, fine, okay. And I had no idea what I was signing myself up for, but I figured it out and I built it into a global program, and here we are.
How long were you with Aramark before you took the position directly with Google?
Oh, so I was with Aramark for 2 years, and I actually moved to CBRE with the network team. So Aramark at the time provided the facilities management services. CBRE provided the project management services. So I moved to CBRE, and then I was with them 5 years before I moved directly to Google.
And then how long have you been with Google now?
18 months, a year now.
CBRE, again, that was just working specifically with Google that entire time. Like that was your dedicated account. Did you get a lot of experience with any other parts of CBRE while you were in that organization?
That's interesting. The CBRE as a business really wants to make sure that their dedicated accounts got exposure to the business and, understood. But it's a massive company and it has a lot of moving parts. And when your day-to-day is so dedicated to a client, it's super difficult to carve out time to get to know your company. Because I didn't sit in a CBRE office. I sat in a Google office. I didn't
right.
work with CBRE people other than the other folk that were on the account. So it was pretty tough actually to feel a part of CBRE and not to feel a part of your client organization.
You're an extension of your customers, or I guess, your account or your customer's organization. And you're working hand in hand, day in day with that group, which is kind of brilliant from the CBRE perspective, or any project management or facility management, asset management company is, it's like that's the whole idea. It's about relationships and being trusted, and then being able to scale along with
And with
that end customer.
with
But yeah, I would imagine, especially, I mean, you say CBRE is a big company, Google's a big company too. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about what is it like in your current role and the exposure to Google as a company? I imagine you feel much more a part of Google, but how, do you feel like you're aware of everything else that the company's doing?
So that last part, absolutely not. It's again, it's super hard to really kind of keep your finger on the pulse of everything because there is so much going on. The digital buildings program, you have our org, which is tech and data. You have workplace design and delivery. So they're the people who actually deliver new office space and upgrade existing office space. There's workplace services, which operate the building. There's corporate engineering, which manage the IT services for the workplace services. So workplace services specific technology as opposed to the corporate services. Right. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of different exposure. You mentioned the decommissioning. That was a great opportunity for me when I was writing a process for pilots to work with the privacy team. To understand, was this the use case they'd come across before, and I never had that opportunity. So, it's really good for exposure and for learning about who does what across the business. But it's a full-time job in itself.
Yeah. What's interesting is when you get to a corporation that large, you have these clusters of organizations that end up kind of working together, and then like that cluster, but then that cluster knows kind of other outside clusters. We've marketed that we're an Intel partner for many years now. And every time we go and talk to someone at Intel or meet someone new, it's that same sort of idea of so which group are you with? And do you know so-and-so? Oh, so if you know so-and-so, then you must also know so-and-so. No, I don't know them. It's like, oh, really? That's interesting because those two work together all the time. Pick your large, distribution, tech distributor. It's the same thing with them.
Absolutely. And even, but in the manufacturing world.
How do you grow and scale a business that is so large and maintain, the cohesiveness and culture in that large company? It's amazing. It's amazing. And I could understand why certain people would then specialize in bringing those cultures, these subgroup cultures together to then make this larger organizational culture, which, and that's why people, I guess, also major in that in school and, learn the philosophy of it and the behavioral organization or the organizational behavior of it, psychology, et cetera, et cetera. It's really just amazing.
It is. It's an ever evolving thing. It never ends. There's no end point to it.
So one thing that large companies often do a good job of is continuing education or training. But then there's also extracurricular activities that you could be a part of to learn and then bring into the organization. Can you talk a little bit about what does Google do to help train you and get you more educated around the things you're focusing on day to day? And then what are those outside resources that may help you along the way too?
That is an interesting question because I'm a big believer in learning and development for your career. It's not something that should ever kind of stop. My my experience with Google specifically has been very self-paced. Because I get to work on such cool things, a lot of my learning is just on the job. You know, I don't know if it came across in my history story, but technology is not part of my background. So everything was just self-learned. My Google history was pretty interesting. My Google search history. I get to work with incredibly smart people who are experts in their field. So when dots aren't joining for me or something's not quite landing, there are always people to go to. And then on the more curated side, we have an internal platform that offers loads of great learnings. Pick a topic and it's there. The problem is finding the time to commit to that. I love going out looking for external courses. I'm much more of a person-to-person learner than a virtual learner. I find it far more effective for me. But again, it's finding the time. But Google does support. It's they want you to learn. They want you to be creative, and sometimes they even want you to learn things that aren't connected to your job, because it does bring new perspectives. It brings new skills. It brings new ways to problem solve, and put things together that you mightn't put things together before. So they're extremely supportive of learning and development.
Do you have an example of something that was outside of your job related topic that you learned about?
When I recently took up, this is not relevant at all, I don't think, but I recently took up sewing and fashion design.
Yeah.
And it's actually the other, now that you ask, I hadn't thought about this before, but now that you ask, it's the other way around. I'm applying my, Claire, you're good at figuring things out that you don't know how to do through your work. I'm applying that to this new hobby, because it's insane how complicated fashion design is. You put your clothes on and you don't think about it. It's actually really complex.
Right.
And, staring at, pattern making is like a jigsaw. Putting a jigsaw pieces together, control systems is like taking a jigsaw apart. So it's kind of backwards a little bit. I'm not sure that's what Google intended, but
yeah, cross-functional training, right? Now take that even a little further. Look at commercialized clothing and all the time and effort that it takes, and just to make a shirt. There's your pattern, there's your material.
Yep.
Here's the direction it needs to go. Here's the longevity, how many washes it can go. And now we're going to go work with a manufacturer, typically on the other side of the world, and we're going to make sure that every shirt that comes off is going to be the same pattern in the same way with the same quality. And then we're going to go make 1 million of those. And then we're going to ship them to all these distributors and, all these retail outlets. And you're just like, how in the world does does all this get done? That's where you think about scale. And again, just what scale means. It's different for different people.
What is interesting, though, and again, a parallel between the two, is the attention to detail that has to balance with the scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of those things. It's so hard to get right. It really is. We often will have in our qualification work, like I said earlier, we have a bunch of requirements, and we are applying the same requirements to every device, regardless of what that device does, with the, under the IP capable umbrella. And we'll have lots of manufacturers come back to us and say, we can't implement IPv6. There's no other customer asking for it. So for them, the return on investment and the scalability, it's just not there for them, which is totally fine. And this is where, we don't make any statements about quality of a, a system or hardware. It's just, as a customer, we have requirements, and the technology will meet the requirements, or it won't. And it's that simple. Whereas, we ought to get people looking for certificates of qualification and approval. And as much as I'd love to sit down and design something like that, would be fun,
Yeah.
Wouldn't be worth the paper
Yeah.
it was on.
Yeah. So, we're a manufacturer. One of the things that we tout is our ISO standard and how we've had that
Mhm.
for, many, many years. And so that is relevant for some people. So, like, if we wanted an OEM relationship with someone, they would want to make sure that we had processes in place that would make sure that our quality, and all the things that are involved in ISO. It's huge. But then there's other people that are like, it doesn't matter. Does it work? And, will it save me energy? And, will it be reliable? Oh, well, yeah, it
Mhm.
does those things too. Um, what about ROI? Do you ever get into ROI conversations, when you're working with these project teams?
Not in a huge way. Personally, the way I operate, I do think in broad terms of if I put time into this thing, what will be the ROI for me? So, um, with manufacturers, for example, like I said, we have this process. We do what we call a pre-qualification step, and that's a paper review of, in theory, how likely is your thing to meet our final requirements. And for me, that is an ROI type of activity. We don't want to invest our resources
Hmm.
into this testing process, both in time and money. And we certainly don't want to be wasting the resources of our manufacturers in having them make changes or, commit their very valuable developer time to us over something else. So in that respect, yeah, but less so with our project teams.
The reason I ask is because earlier you used the phrase, how long is a piece of string? And it was, how long is this going to take? And I had someone yesterday ask me the question, what's the average ROI of one of your products? And every time I get that question, I think I might start using your phrase of how long is a piece of string, because it really depends on the application. We've been part of solutions that saved $700,000 a year in energy costs for 2 schools. And that was a great project. I mean, huge ROI. But it was because, those schools were, already being run 24 hours. There were no schedules. I mean, the opportunity was huge for
Mhm.
that. Then we have other ones where it's like, well, we saved $3,200 a year in annual cost, and we discovered that within the first week. Okay, that's great. But, when you look at the cost of the project, there's still some there left to be desired. And then we have other projects where people say, I love using your system because it just gives us better visibility because it's cloud-based. Well, what is that worth?
And here, the qualitative measures.
Qualitative. Yes.
Mhm.
And so, well,
Yeah,
what's the ROI? Well, how long is a piece of string? Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, that's good. So, all right, so there you go. Two major things that I've taken away from our conversations. What about? So you mentioned working with Kathy Farrington. Was that her name?
Mhm.
Yep. So
Yep.
uh, how using her as an example, or even other people, have there been leaders that have been particularly impactful or empowering to you? Making those suggestions of how successful you could be.
Well, Kathy, absolutely. She just put so much faith in my abilities, and I had some serious imposter syndrome going on in the early days. Because I was a project coordinator at the time, I would help her with very administrative type of things, and because I didn't have a background in this, I would sit in meetings taking notes for, a group of technical leads. I'll never forget. There was this one technical lead. I don't think she's with the company anymore. If you're familiar with Google Docs, you can see everyone collaborating in the same document. So I'd be typing furiously, and she would be coming in behind me correcting all the details I'd gotten wrong. Um, so it was for sure a baptism of fire, and for me, that's absolutely the way. Kind of like I almost would use the phrase like the way Kathy raised me.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, it was just she exposed me to so much of the program because it was early on, when I joined, um, it was almost like a startup. I always kind of think of this program as a bit like a startup. Um, I just got to do so much, and I got to understand so much of the program, which was valuable for CBRE at the time, because I was able to go back and give them the Box 101 lessons in layman's. So that was really good. So Kathy was unbelievable in that respect. Then I work for Savine Lamb now, and she's been unbelievable. She's like a mentor. She's such strong conviction in how she sees the value of her work. She really empowers me and the rest of her team to make our decisions based on our best judgment, and very, very pro value work as opposed to busy work. So I've learned so much from her. And like I said, Google's full of incredibly smart people that you can draw on, and it's rare because of the culture in the company. It's rare you would reach out to someone for help and get turned down, even if it's full-on cold calling. So very, very lucky in that regard.
Well, and that's interesting. So that's kind of full circle when you talk about value work. What's that ROI of our time as we go in and do these assessments? And I also like that phase gate approach of saying, here's the pre-qualification. And so how likely are you to complete our program? How likely are we to have this value work? I mean, that's kind of ultimately what that pre-qualification is.
It's expensive for both sides. And no matter how big a company is, no one wants to waste their resources. So it's just about respecting that relationship and working for what works for both, as opposed to just works for one.
The power of saying no is also powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I've been trying to say no to more things, because you can only say yes so many times. It is, and it's difficult, especially when there's so much opportunity. Which direction do you pick? Yeah. Which one will win? If only I could do a pre-qualification of all these things. Have you found any opportunities to mentor others yet?
Formally or informally, or both? I'm not sure. I don't think formally, no. Mm-hmm. But I have colleagues, and we'll bounce things off one another. And what's coming to my mind, and I don't think this is necessarily mentorship in its truest form. When I was with CBRE, we had a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And there was, a volunteer drive for program managers or volunteers to put together different programs. So I put together a team talk program where we'd pick a DE&I topic each month. We did it monthly. And we'd go out and we'd look for speakers who had, could be external speakers. Mostly it was internal speakers, because we wanted this to feel like a community. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that came up for colleagues who I hadn't worked with before, but I was getting to know through this program, some of the emotional things that came up, me as program manager was kind of almost coaching them or mentoring them through this experience of having to speak about these really emotional type of topics, and getting over their fear of what was essentially public speaking, because I too have had crippling fear of that. So that was kind of almost like an informal mentoring, and one of the reasons I actually was very sad to leave CBRE, because that program was quite impactful to me.
Well, yeah, it's a very personal thing to empower others, and it's very impactful.
Well, yeah.
Yep. And I think you too have been impacted by people empowering you. Hey,
for sure,
you should move to Australia. You're right. I should move to Australia.
I might just be really easily swayed
by good ideas and good friends. Yeah. Well, maybe it wasn't a good idea. You came back, but Yeah, no. One of the things that it's just very rewarding is to find opportunities to give back and to empower others. And that's another reason for this podcast is to encourage people who are listening to listen to stories like that and say, well, how could I go and empower others? Whether it's in the topics and knowledge of the industry or the day-to-day activities, or in how can I take my experience of thinking about things in terms of value work and bring others into that conversation also. That makes me better, it makes them better, and it makes the organization better. And then ultimately it makes the industry better. So, no, I think that's
Yeah.
great.
But I think with respect to that, probably my biggest lesson is to have faith in my own skill set and know that because women in tech is a bit of a topic of conversation. Sure. And I know I personally, being both woman and Irish, I default to modesty at all times. And Catholic. So it's just knowing that you have something to bring to the table. When you're sitting around a table with so many smart people who are experts in their field, it's really easy to feel intimidated.
Yeah.
But actually, you may have something that they don't. And it's just having that faith in yourself and taking chances on things and knowing you'll figure them out, and then also knowing when to say no.
Yes.
Learning when to say yes and when to say no, that in of itself can be very empowering.
Yes. Well, and that kind of goes back to another comment you mentioned earlier, the imposter syndrome. Is that something you still suffer from, and how do you deal with it?
Yes, I do still suffer from it. Just recently I got handed a new program to figure out a strategy for a couple of new testing areas. And I was thinking, oh my God, I've never done this before. What am I going to do? How am I going to learn this? I don't get it. But each week it gets better. And, so long as you try, I think it works out. I've learned that I don't plan my career. I say yes, and then things just work out.
That's right. Yes.
So maybe it's an ostrich approach. I stick my head in the sand and I just get on with it, and the imposter syndrome slowly gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah. Well, imposter syndrome, I think, is very common, and I know I've certainly dealt with it myself. And one of the things that helped me get through it is this concept of the smarter you get and the more knowledge you obtain, the more you realize you don't know. And the more you realize you don't know, the dumber you feel. So ironically, the more you learn, the dumber you feel, and you have to work through that. And
you do.
And that's where I think having a community or a culture at a company, a mentoring program, even maybe external organizations or cohorts that are dedicated to saying, hey, I'm seeing this thing in you that's positive, and that's really good. I noticed this humility in you when you didn't know this thing. That's a good, positive thing. And, keep that up. You're obviously learning. So it's like, okay, it's constantly encouraging and empowering each other, in that day to day as we learn to feel dumber.
Well, I have to admit, one thing that has been, for me, a very clear positive is I'm learning to listen better. Yeah, when I think back to my 20s, I don't think I knew how to listen.
Yeah.
Again, that what you said, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know enough. And I think the easier it becomes to stop and listen and take it in. That's what I found personally.
Yeah. Yeah. And then hopefully that's also then driving humility and realizing I'm not that hot shot I thought I was in my 20s.
Yeah. But a bit of confidence goes a long way too.
Yes. Well, exactly. So you could be confident and humble at the same time. What about public speaking? You talked about that. How did you get over that?
I
Did you
don't
get
think I
over
am
it?
over. I don't think I am over it, Tim. This is my debut on podcasts.
Oh,
So
well, fantastic.
thank you. Yeah. And actually, maybe I was with you on my debut of panel discussions, which is interesting. So
All
we're starting
right.
to see a trend here.
All right. Well, what public speaking opportunity can I invite you to next?
Yeah, yeah.
A 2 hour lecture with
No,
Claire.
please no. I couldn't. I wouldn't possibly. My humility. I wouldn't possibly have enough to say. um, no. How did I get over it? Interestingly, as a child, I was big into drama. So, like, when I think back, I used to go up on stages and sing and audition.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became an adult and went, oh God. Um, Again, Google has been pretty instrumental in helping me get over that. When you're constantly in meetings in front of groups of people and having to present ideas or cost of something, or you learn to get used to the sound of your own voice and answering questions. And again, Kathy and Sabine, they're very active in kind of the public domain of speaking, so they really encourage that of the rest of the program too. So I don't think it's something you'll ever get, or I will ever get over, but
Yeah.
I'm for sure a lot better now than I was.
Well, and then, again, it's the on the job training, it's the learning,
Yeah.
it's the knowledge you do gain. And then you realize I have something to contribute. That doesn't
That's
mean
it.
I have to know everything. I don't have
That's
to
it.
be an absolute expert. I don't have to have PhD level understanding on the topic to go and contribute, because that's then ultimately how we empower and encourage others. There's always someone 3 steps ahead and there's always someone 3 steps back. And as long as we're looking at the people ahead and learning from them and then turning around and helping and pulling the people along with us, that's the idea of community and culture and empowerment.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Yeah.
So what does the next? You got a long career ahead of you, right? You got a lot more
Fingers
to
crossed.
learn. Yep. So what do you think are some of the things that you're going to be diving into and trying to learn and invest time in so that you're ready?
Yeah, well, this year I'm really looking forward to this year. Like I said, we're looking at some more testing programs that we can add to the digital buildings program to round out and bring that testing program to the next level. So there's 2 areas. One is around data validation and testing assumptions that, when a business says I have X problem, that firstly, the data you're gathering from whatever system is in place is accurate and reliable, because sometimes it's not. So it's testing to make sure that it's accurate and reliable. And it's also testing to make sure it will solve the problem that you have, and testing those assumptions and the usability of the data and its longevity. And then how do you decommission when it's not being usable? So that's one of the strategies I'm trying to pull together. Another is I have another very smart and lovely colleague called Trevor Perry, and he's built a open source data schema called UDMI, a Universal Device Management Interface, which is open source and heavily influenced by the industry. He works really closely with different companies to make sure what's being built can be used and is reasonable. So I'm trying to help figure out how we kind of stress test the features within that in operational buildings. And then the third exciting thing, which I'm really loving at the minute, is that whole testing process. I said we have Trevor actually also built a test automation tool called DAQ, D-A-Q. I am taking that tool and I'm learning how to be a product manager. And the team that do the qualification are actually picking the whole thing apart and redesigning it, and we're going to relaunch it, addressing all the problems that various users have identified. So that's been really enjoyable. So that's what 2023 is going to be for me.
That's amazing. And it's great to have those internal resources and partners and ultimately friends that can build these things with you, and you could influence. And you're all kind of on the same mission, right? Like we're trying to make Google's buildings and infrastructure and assets as high level as we can to give the qualitative and quantitative ROI and problem solving that's needed, and to do that in the most consistent and reliable way possible. And that's quite a feat. But I definitely think you're up to it, and it's good to have those partners.
Well, it's a good job. We have a really good team. So
yeah. How big is the team total? Do you mind me asking?
My team or the wider boss team?
Let's do both.
Both. As I said the second part, I was like, I actually don't know the number. My team, there's 7. So we have two test labs, one in the UK and one in the US, and me. And on the boss program, maybe 40.
Okay.
Total.
Yeah.
I could very well be wrong on that, but off the top of my head, that's my guess.
Plus or minus 40.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Claire, I just want to thank you for having this conversation. I think you exude a lot of character qualities that I think it's the exact reason you're in the position that you're in, and it's things that others can learn from as well. It's the willingness to put yourself out there, the willingness to take risks and to try new things, dedication to learning new things, and being relentless in that. And then also just trying to always think about how can we take it's just this approach of making sure that we're following the paradigms and the frameworks that you're putting in place, but then always reevaluating. You're not necessarily, it doesn't sound like you're being stuck in the same mindset, but you're trying to adapt as you learn these new things. And that's really great. And I think that applies to really anyone as they look at their career and how they want to grow, particularly now, specifically in this case, what does that mean in the building space? What does that mean for the systems that we're deploying? So thank you for that. I think I'm very glad that this could be your maiden podcast voyage, and hopefully it's the first of many.
Me too, and thanks so much for having me. I had a great time.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that wraps this episode of the Building Geniuses podcast, a production of KMC Controls. If you've enjoyed this conversation, we encourage you to subscribe and share. Subscribe and save. Been on Amazon recently. And if there's anyone that you know that should be on this podcast, tag them in the comments and reach out to us on social. We could tag them in the comments also. And as always, we appreciate you listening. Until next time, learn something new, teach someone something, and build your inner genius.